To voters who are confused about the changing maps, the changing dates, and to African Americans concerned that this is going to draw black members of Congress off the map, what do you say?
Well, I think it's been a wonderful process. They've been the Democrats, or as I call the Democrats, because they are dumb in so many ways. They've redistricted for years, and now we took our shot, and it looks like we're going to pick up a lot of seats, and that's a good thing.
2 more states inching closer to possibly eliminating their only Democratic members of Congress, who are also, right now, their only black representatives. Alabama's governor announcing new primary election dates for 4 districts that were redrawn just hours after a decision last night from the Supreme Court. In South Carolina, state lawmakers moved a step closer to redrawing their map to do the very same thing. And we are still waiting for a ruling that may come any minute from the Supreme Court on Virginia's map. Democrats asking the justices to let them use the map that voters approved last month, one that Democrats believe would net them 4 seats. And today, one vulnerable Republican member of Congress from that state facing backlash and calls to resign after this moment on local radio.
If Hakeem Jeffries wants to be involved in Virginia politics, then I suggest he does what a bunch of New Yorkers are doing. Leave New York, move down here to Virginia, run for office down here. You can represent us. If not, get your cotton picking hands off of Virginia.
That's right. Ditto. Yes to that.
Worth noting that Hakeem Jeffries is the first black lawmaker ever to lead a party in Congress. In a statement, Congresswoman Jen Kiggans described the reaction to that moment as lies and distortion, saying, quote, "The radio host should not have used that language, and I do not and did not condone it. It was obvious to anyone listening that I was agreeing that Hakeem Jeffries should stay out of Virginia," end quote. This morning, Jeffries' office responded saying this, quote, "Extremists who endorse disgusting, vile, and racist language are pathetic. Jen Kiggans has no interest in our nation's progress toward a multiracial democracy and apparently craves a return to the days of Jim Crow racial oppression in the South." That's why MAGA Republicans in legislatures and courts across America have launched a full-scale assault on black representation, end quote. All right, joining our panel in the arena, CNN political commentator, South Carolina's own Bakari Sellers. Bakari, another day in American politics, it seems here. The language from Congresswoman Kiggans there, she heard what the radio host said, and her quote was ditto. What do you make of what she said and what this all means?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more concerned about the individuals who are actually casting ballots to eliminate black voices. The racism, the sensationalism, the cotton-picking terms that are used. Look, that's been a part of Southern politics, unfortunately, for a very long period of time. It's racist. It's people using racism as political currency. But I'm actually more concerned about those individuals right now in states like Alabama, in states like Louisiana, which are eliminating black voices from Congress because we fought so hard, we bled so much to have that representation. I do think Donald Trump is going to take a slight setback here in South Carolina, because South Carolina has the pride that apparently other states don't have. And you see the courageous leaders like Shane Massey who are fighting back against Donald Trump even as we sit here on air right now. So look, you can be racist, you can say cotton picking, you can use all the slang and all the negative terminology, racist terminology you want. I'm more concerned about the actions that people are taking throughout the South to eliminate black voices.
I want to play something Karl Rove had to say over the weekend about the potential unintended consequences that could come from all of this. Let's watch.
In the South, where you take these large black-dominated cities like New Orleans or rural areas like in South Carolina that are dominated by blacks and who are traditionally Democrat voters, and split them up into several different Republican districts and make things more problematic in a swing year. Nothing ever plays out exactly in politics as we think it does.
What do you make of that? I take your point writ large about this potential elimination of black voices, but do you think it's possible Republicans are creating unintended problems for themselves too?
I mean, Republicans right now are governing and showing the political instincts of a bag of cabbage. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. Yes, they're going to create more swing districts in South Carolina. You're going to make, instead of having Jim Clyburn being the lone congressman, you're going to have 2 or 3 competitive districts. Not saying Democrats are going to win every single time, but the fact is the Republican president is so unpopular that they're having to redistrict in the middle of a decade. I think people need to understand the gravity of what that means. And so when you're having to change the rules in the middle of the ball game, meaning that you can't win the House like you want to, and you're going to have a competitive Senate, I think that shows you and shows the American public what's happening. Black voters don't just dissipate because you change districts. They actually are able to, and in particular now, black voters have always, since we actually gained access to the franchise, from attacks, from intimidation, from violence at the polls, we've always overcome those obstacles. The problem is I'm tired of having to run faster and jump higher just to cast my ballot and get somebody who I want, who represents my interest in Washington, D.C. I think that Republicans bit off more than they can chew because they're being governed by their racist gut and underbelly of the party, and not the George W. Bushes or the Mitt Romneys or those individuals who believed in the better promise of America, although we differed on how to get there.
Congressman Graves, I mean, this is close to home for you, since, of course, you are former congressman from Louisiana. How do you see this?
First of all, I want to undermine a premise. A premise here is that only a black person can represent a black voter and only a white person can represent a white voter, and I totally disagree with that. Now, the next thing is, I think that it was a mistake to take on this redistricting thing. I do. I think it was a dumb idea. I don't think it should have happened, with the exception of Texas, that I believe has a mid-decade reassessment. I think it was a bad idea, and I think you're going to end up with disenfranchised voters all over the place. And I think that you should not be in a situation to where you allow elected officials to go out there and cherry pick who their voters are. I think it's simply a bad direction. Lastly, I think that closed primaries actually contribute to the polarization and the disenfranchising of voters. And I think that Louisiana, up until this year, that had an open primary system, was a great system that allowed elected officials to go out and attract votes from all across the spectrum the entire year. I think that's the way to do it.
Can I make 3 quick points? Contemporary point. The states that are now in the process of eliminating black-held congressional seats, the overwhelming majority of their population growth over the last 15 years have been among non-white voters, non-white citizens. Louisiana, the white population is lower today than it was in 2023. All of their population growth has been among people of color. They're eliminating districts. Texas, Alabama, 92% of their population growth has been among people of color. They're eliminating minority-held districts. South Carolina, a little over 50%. Tennessee, 2/3. Florida, 87%. So basically, you have a situation where minority population growth is fueling the political power of these states, and they are being systematically denied the opportunity to elect people who represent those interests at the same time they are creating it. Second, the late 19th century, when Reconstruction was unraveled and segregation was imposed, is certainly one of the most odious periods in American history. There was no single Congress in that period, when black political representation was erased the first time, that eliminated as many black-held congressional seats as is going to happen in November. This will be the most ever in American history. And third, finally, this is going to be maximum civic damage for minimal partisan gain, because in the end, people don't realize the 25 states that voted 3 times for Trump, they control 185 congressional seats, and there's a lot of room to play around that. The 19 states that voted 3 times against Trump, they also control 185 congressional seats. Republicans have been able to get out faster because Democrats have more hurdles with commissions and stuff. But by 2028, I think there's going to be a minimal partisan gain, and we're going to see enormous civic damage to the country from eliminating both minority-held seats and competitive seats. I mean, the House is supposed to be, the founders envisioned the House as the institution closest to the people. It's going to be the most inflexible institution, where it's almost impossible to move the majorities no matter what else is happening.
The one thing I would say in response to Garrett is I don't think anybody would dispute that a white person is capable of representing black constituents. It happens all across America. The challenge that we have to confront is that across many states in the United States, typically the South, frankly where cotton was grown, starting in Louisiana up to South Carolina, there's remarkable, almost a one-to-one parallel between race and partisan affiliation. And what ends up happening is these efforts to carve up partisan districts end up carving up districts that are black districts, and have been. The whole point of the Voting Rights Act, starting back in 1964 and re-upped as recently as 2006, was to eliminate that problem. So yes, of course we ought to have white folks representing black people, but that's not entirely the whole problem. It's far bigger than that.
I think it's also worth noting that Section 2 also has an impact sub-federally, has an impact on city councils, on county commissions, on school boards, which make funding decisions, for example, about schools in neighborhoods that are usually attended by black children. And so when you think about what those protections in the Voting Rights Act were meant to do in terms of helping ensure that, again, funding goes to, to neighborhoods that are predominantly black, that's an important piece of what is being lost, I think, in the gutting of Section 2. I do want to say really quickly, though, I very much agree with Congressman Graves about mid-cycle redistricting on both sides. I think a pox on both houses.
Bakari Sellers, let me give you the last word in this block here. You've been listening to us talk about it. What say you?
No, I mean, I think that the point that needs to be made is that we're just trying to make sure that it's not necessarily the race of the individual that represents you, but the fact that they share your lived experiences, the fact that they're able to represent you wholly and fully in the United States Congress. I think Memphis is probably the best example of that. It was actually a black seat prior to having the Voting Rights Act. It was somebody that was there who was able to represent those interests. And even though Steve Cohen is a white man representing the interest, he's from the community. He's actually taking the community's interest to Washington, D.C. Now that you have that split into 3 different areas, those black voters in Memphis will no longer have anyone that represents their interest. And so I think that's probably the most important lesson that we can learn from this. And we've worked too hard, but we're going backwards now.
All right, Bakari Sellers, thanks very much for being here. Really appreciate it. The rest of our panel is going to stick around. Coming up next, we've got more